This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks, and we're coming at you Thursday afternoon. It's October 3rd. We got Britt Robson coming up on the pod today. We haven't had Britt on the pod since the cat deal happened, and I'm glad we've had a little bit of time for this to settle in before the two of us have chatted, because the picture has kind of been filling in more and more each day over the course of this week. Obviously, it took a little bit. Because it took a while for the deal to be finalized, but the deal is finalized. We had the introductory press conference for Dante DiVincenzo, Julius Randle, and Keita Bates-Diop this morning. So plan today is Britt and I will discuss a little bit of what was said there, initial reactions, I guess, to those guys being there and what Conley had to say about them too. But then we'll always, as always, kind of go a little bit broader with Britt and just get his overall thoughts, kind of maybe be recycling through a little bit of the stuff we've talked through this week. But like I said, my thoughts have kind of been evolving each day, and we haven't got Britt's thoughts on this yet either. So Britt coming up in a minute, but first, as always, today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks, and it's not too late to put together a daily fantasy lineup for the NFL games this weekend. I put together two picks here, just kind of dinking around this morning before going live here. I have Drake London to go for less than 63.5 yards. I was looking at it. He has the 8th highest receiving yard total on the board this week. I just feel like that's maybe a little bit overvaluing London in this Atlanta offense. So picking a quieter night for him, less than 63.5 rushing yards. And then I have just to, I guess you can do a Thursday night game with the Sunday game. So I threw in Josh Jacobs there, plays the Vikings, of course, but I like Jacobs. It makes a little bit more sense for me that Josh Jacobs rushing total is really high. So I went with more than 64.5 rushing yards for Josh Jacobs this week, even against the good Vikings defense. So submit your lineup at prizepicks.com or on the Prize Picks app for this weekend. And if you don't already have an account, please sign up using the promo code Dane, and you will receive a $50 sign-up bonus after submitting your first lineup.
Hey, yeah.
All right, we are now joined by Britt Robson from MimPost. Britt, week one of training camp in the books. Obviously, they somehow, for some reason, play a game tomorrow night. You wrote a big column on the cat trade that came out before the week started, before media day, before these training camp practices, before the press conference we had today. I found myself, like, not in a major way, but just kind of every day, like my thoughts kind of evolving a little bit on the deal, maybe specific pieces of the deal. I'm wondering if there's not like if you could have your column back and rewrite it or anything like that, but what has changed? What do you feel like you have more info on, or how are you just thinking about this now, 5-6 days into it?
Well, I think this morning's press conference helped a lot in that.
I did too.
And then Finch yesterday, I wasn't there, but I saw the clips. I thought that the trade was made for DiVincenzo only, and that Randle was kind of a useful salary that would have to be coped with during the season, and perhaps next season if he opts in. I now feel like there's some intentionality in having Randle on board, simply because Finch seems pretty positive towards Randle, and Randle seemed extremely positive towards Finch. It may all be tactical, but it doesn't seem like it. And what I wrote in the piece was one of the big things I said is, if Finch can find the right role for Randle, and if Randle buys into it, then this is a lot better deal. And I think the odds of that happening are a lot better just based on words. I haven't, the proof is obviously in the rotation and the level of play. But Randle said, like, his most comfortable time on offense was under Finch, who he called a genius and who he said was basically the person who put him exactly where he needed to be in certain circumstances, certain instances. It was, a wet kiss for a good, I'd say 3/4 of the time he opened his mouth, it was about talking about Chris Finch and how great he is. So
That's where I've evolved most too, is around it, or maybe part of it is just thinking more about the Randle piece. There's obviously so much distraction involved in it being Cat and being a big move because it's Cat. And then there are other pieces to the trade. There is the financial flexibility. There is the DiVincenzo's on like a nice player that seems to make a ton of sense on a really good contract. So I think we went to DiVincenzo first, maybe just, again, like you said, a lack of information, a lack of words, whatever it might be. But that's what's been most striking to me. I'm gonna play. I got a little short clip of Finch talking about Randle yesterday, and then I'll play what you were just mentioning about Finch here too, just so we give the listeners a little bit of context. Here's Finch.
This personal connection you have with Julius and getting to know him there in New Orleans.
I loved coaching Julius. I mean, we crossed paths for 1 year. We got off to a great start that season, and then the season kind of went downhill. It was the year that Anthony asked for the trade. But Julius was a joy to coach. Really enjoyed working with him. Great pro, loves being in the gym. Comes in with a smile on his face every day. He's hungry for feedback. Really pleasant. Always kind of kept an eye on him. Just was really happy for his success in New York, particularly in the beginning. Like when he helped really turn around a franchise that needed somebody to come in there and do some work. I was really excited the opportunity to be reunited with him, just because of that connection.
And then here's Randy.
Coming back and playing with Finch. I'm extremely excited. When I left Finch in New Orleans, I wanted him in New York with me, because he was such a great coach. I've always thought he was a genius, and he's a great communicator, knows how to get the best out of his players. So I remember playing for him there, and I always felt like super prepared for the games, knowing what was going to happen, where I was going to get my shots from, what he needed from me. I just felt like he just opened up my game, and I became a really versatile player. I always say, like, playing there, and even still to this point, that was the easiest my game had ever felt, playing under Finch. Just because he's just pretty good. I think he's just that good of a coach.
So I think the great communicator line in there is big, because I think about, as anytime bringing in a high usage, a good player, whatever, it's about communicating role, right? And what you need within the context of this team. And I know that might sound like, some people might misconstrue that as, oh, this is a smaller role, it's lesser, it's not that. It's like how Julius Randle fit in best within the context of the New York Knicks was one thing, and how he would be different than if it were the Hornets, or if it were the Nuggets, or if it were the Timberwolves. And I think it's on the coach and maybe the coaching staff and the front office to some extent to communicate that, so as to effectively pull that out of the player. And I think while the results of Finch coaching offenses have been mixed, and we've certainly had our qualms about that. It hasn't been clean over the course of the entire time offensively. The one thing I do not doubt at all about Finch as a coach is his elite ability to communicate. And I think that's really important when changing your roster in such a major way, but in particular to effectively communicate to the biggest player that you brought into the trade with Randle. I thought that was really encouraging.
Yeah, and obviously, and Tim Connolly famously said this when he came in. He said, when he talked about, I haven't gotten to know these guys yet. So, ta-da. And I thought, it was more like pro forma stuff. But I do notice that he's sincere about his relationships, Tim Connolly, with the players. And the thing about Finch and Randle, I knew that Finch had him for a year in New Orleans, just looking at Basketball Reference timelines. Mm-hmm. But I didn't realize how solid the relationship was. And I think the key word here is trust. Obviously, both of these guys sound like they implicitly trust the other one to be a good faith actor. And that is going to be necessary, because if you're in the starting lineup with Rudy Gobert, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, who's supposed to get more touches this year, and Mike Conley, then you are not going to be as ball dominant, even when you had Jalen Brunson on the court with you in New York. You just are not. And if you are as ball dominant, it's going to be a problem. He talked about playing next to Mitchell Robinson. Mitchell Robinson is happy if he gets 3 shots a game and doesn't ever want his number called. Rudy Gobert wants his number called. When he rolls to the rim and he's wide open, he wants it. He wants the ball. And so Julius Randle also likes to be operating in the paint. And then you've got, the whole idea about Ant playing off the ball and playing on the ball, Jaden and Gobert on pick and rolls, Mike Conley and Gobert on pick and rolls. There just isn't as much usage. John Randall's usage in New York was over 29 every season.
Yeah.
I said John again, didn't I? Julius Randle's.
You caught yourself the first time. Oh, so
yeah, but that means I regressed.
Yeah.
I think I'll just call him Randall.
I think Julius needs to now come out with the big eye black triangles under the eyes.
Right.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, they're about the same size, actually.
That's really true.
That's easily confused. But anyway, so I think that there will be. There are 2 types of prestige that the Wolves almost have to choose between them. Does Julius Randle want more touches, or does he want to be the starter? Because if he wants more touches, I see his role off the bench and enabling Ant to sit. One of the problems the Wolves had was that second unit, getting guys who could create their own shot.
Don't you think you can just find that within rotations? Like being able to, how it worked last year, right? It was like Cat checked out, or Cat or Rudy checked out at the start of the second quarter because Ant played the whole first quarter. I think you can kind of just put Randle into that role if you do want him to play more with the second unit. Just give him that, right? And he can still start.
Well, and if it's a titular starting role, like 5 minutes in the first quarter, then I think that's a nice balance. I would hope that would be what it is. My point is, I don't think Ant and Randle should be on the floor, most of the time together. I think that I just think they are both pretty ball dominant players, and this is not like there are 3 role players with no mouths to feed. Rudy Gobert wants the ball at certain times, and it does affect him. And McDaniels has heard, this will be the 3rd year in a row that McDaniels has heard, and this time there's a real purpose in what Finch is saying, that he wants him to be, open up. And then look at Nas. Nas on the court next to Rudy Gobert
was great.
Over 900 minutes. They did not give up 100 points per 100 possessions. Mm-hmm. Defense remains the identity of this team. There are all kinds of reasons why Julius Randle, almost did it again, does not have the same free reign. And he probably wouldn't have had it in New York either with the emergence of Brunson and the acquisition of Bridges. But I do think the good old days of him being high 29 usage guy are over, I would assume.
Yeah, it'll have to come down. I think that's for sure. Just, stylistically, the way the Knicks played was not only so different than the Wolves, but so different than a lot of teams in the NBA. I think if Julius Randle went to almost any other team in the league, he would come down from a 29% usage rate. I don't think that personally. I don't think that's an indictment of him, and I'm not as far on the spectrum of view of that, meaning he and Ant can't work. It has to work. That is that to have the success this season that they're saying they want, that they don't want to lose a step, that they have the aspirations to do the same things that they did last year. There has to be a cohesion, I think, between Randle and Ant, at least to the levels that there were of Cat and Ant. And I think we all know that wasn't like perfect either from a fit, at least offensively standpoint. So I view it kind of like the same way I thought about it last week when it was Cat and Ant. Like, how this is an imperfect fit, like on paper. How do you maximize it rather than how do we try to mitigate the minutes that those guys are together?
See, and I would push back on that by asking you it's a rhetorical question. How do you think Nas and Ant work together?
Well, yeah.
And don't you want to maximize that? Mm-hmm. Isn't that the guy who's on the same timeline that you move Cat to create more of a future for him? Yeah. We don't know if Randle's going to be here more than this year and next year. We do know that they don't trade Cat unless they assume they are going to sign Nas and put him on the same plane as Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards. That's the whole thing. So why wouldn't you foster that relationship since it's a better relationship anyway?
Yeah, I mean, well, theoretically better, but the assumption.
Well, if put it this way, if Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards put together the same, net ratings and fly around fiesta that Nas and Ant put together, then that will be an incredible trade. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm just being realistic that
I think that's fair. I think
Randle and Ant are not naturally compatible. I believe Nas and Ant are naturally compatible. Their games look very, very compatible to me.
So to me, maybe this is just like overly simplistic, but the way I've been thinking about it is like, I don't think the Wolves had we need to start Naz Reid problem. I think they had we need to find a way to give Naz Reid more minutes problem. And I think there's a way. I mean, Naz played like 22 minutes a game last year in games that Karl also played. I think more in obviously the games Karl didn't play, but I think that 22 is too low. And I think everybody in the organization would recognize that. I just think there are ways to get that 22 to 28 without having Naz start. And maybe that is a little bit, Karl almost always closed every single game, right? Maybe there's a greater frequency with which Naz closes games now in place of Randle, or maybe in place of Gobert. And then they go like Randle or Naz at the 5, Randle or Naz at the 4 there. Like, I just think, to me, I just don't see the Naz thing as like has to start part of it.
Okay, but the umbrella I'm working under and the way we started this conversation was how Julius Randle will fit, not only in terms of his minutes, but in terms of his attitude and in terms of both sides thinking that this is a productive, synergistic relationship. And I think that the emergence of Naz Reid, which was I believe, one of the precipitating factors for moving Cat,
sure,
remains. And so the pressure is on who? I mean, something has to give. And one of the things I think that has to give is the idea that Julius Randle will be as prominent in the rotation as one might immediately think just looking at it on paper, not watching this team over the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And like I said, I think the way I put it was probably overly simplistic. I do think, to your point there, like it probably isn't going to be clean right away, right? Like I think about the first couple months of when Rudy got here,
right?
Year one, like that wasn't clean right away. I mean, most of the season it wasn't. I mean, obviously derailed by Cat's injury and such, but I baked that all into my expectation of, and I want to be, if it's 15 games in and it's still, not clean, I do think there probably, for the greater good of the ceiling, needs to be a patience there in seeing how much you can get out of the Randle piece. I'm not saying it's for sure going to work or anything like that, but given where you're at, I think you have to give it a real earnest opportunity. And I don't think that opportunity necessarily comes at a great limitation for Naz.
Okay. And where I would push back there is, yes, the fit with Cat and Gobert was hinky, and but there was never a question Rudy Gobert was here on a 4-year contract, and there was never a question. There was questions more from people like you and me than there was in the front office that Gobert and Cat would be together. I think it's very difficult, given the ongoing salary thing that does hang over this team, that Julius Randle has. It's tough to have my position undercut by being stupid about his first name, but it is hard when a guy is going to be getting a $31 million option or not. So, 82 games from now.
Oh, yeah, it's confusing. It's for sure confusing.
The future is cloudy, and what makes that cloudiness even worse in some respects is that it's real money to Julius Randle, depending on how the Wolves use him.
Yeah.
And yet the Wolves can't be thinking that way. They have to be thinking, we're going for a championship, and the best way to get a championship is X, Y, or whatever. And so how long do you wait? How long do you say, well, all right, I agree. 15 games is way too short a period of time before you pull any plugs or anything. But I do think by the All-Star break at the latest, which, by the way, also is a great time to trade Randle if things are just not working well. There are outs, I guess. One out is February. Another out is option year or not. Whether you want to renegotiate or not, whether you want to just leave the deal in place if he does opt in. I mean, there's all different ways this can go. But back to our original point, I thought that was going to be a lot more fraught until I heard about what a cool relationship Randle and Finch have. And I think that Finch is a straight shooter. And if Randle really respects Finch, then I've got to think that, it could be like a Taurean Prince type situation, only obviously a lot better in terms of Finch telling Taurean Prince exactly what he needed to do to boost his minutes. And then Prince going out and doing it, and Finch boosting his minutes.
Kyle Anderson too.
Yeah, right. Randle obviously is a more prominent player and a more talented player than Taurean Prince. But I do think that it remains all the things about the trade, and I'm on record as thinking that trade is a good thing, not only for the long term, but for the short term. I think that the addition of DiVincenzo as the real backup to Conley, along with Na, is more of a positive than the negative of Randle having to take some time to fit in or not being able to space the floor like Cat. So defensively, I would regard it as a wash at best. I mean, you and I just did a podcast last time I was on. We were talking about Cat being above average defender in this scheme. So there are ways. There is no way that I would say just swap in Randle, swap out Cat is a better thing for the Timberwolves. But I do think the DiVincenzo thing makes it a good deal now. And then the numbers are obviously the financial flexibility makes it a good deal. But the sore point, if not the sore point, the question mark remains whether or not Julius Randle can be an ongoing positive person and whether or not he will be able to be positive enough to warrant a longer term relationship. And if he doesn't, whether or not that shorter term relationship will turn negative, as it almost inevitably does when a parting looks inevitable.
I want to keep going on this. Let's grab our first break first. Today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company, and want to put Falling Knife on your radar for Friday night's game against the Lakers. Is a place that you can go watch it. Falling Knife is going to stay open late for that game. It's a 9:30 p.m. tip. So if you want to go watch the Wolves game with some Wolves fans, I'm sure there'll be plenty of people there at Falling Knife. Maybe get there early if you're wanted to be intentional about getting a spot in the tap room, but it'll be on the TVs and the projection screen there. They also have their anniversary party on Saturday afternoon. It's a kind of block party down there for those of you who have been there before. I think we're going to head over there at some point on Saturday. But as always, starting tomorrow, want to have Falling Knife on your radar as a place to go watch Wolves games. And then in 2 weeks, Britt and I on October 19th will be there for Wolves Fest from 3 to 7 p.m. Today's show is also brought to you by Adriana Lonick at Coldwell Banker Realty. And if you are in the market for buying or selling a home, you're going to need help from a realtor, and you need someone to get started with you on that process. And I think Adriana would be a great option for you. We also have a promotion going where for as many of you as sign up for a free consultation with her, you will be entered to win some Wolves tickets to a game this season. If you've checked out the secondary market on tickets, that's actually quite the reward. It is they made a big trade, but this team is still going to be in very high demand. So that's a nice little perk for something that if you are buying or selling a house, you're going to need anyway. So again, that's Adriana Lonick. You can go to our website. It's called thedancingrealtor.com for more information, or you can always call or text her at 715-304-9920 to book that strategy session. All that information is in the show notes. But contact Adriana and give yourself a probably pretty good chance to win some Wolves tickets this season. All right, but I do want to get to the DiVincenzo point, but I made this list this morning because I think this is relevant for both the Wolves and the Knicks. There's this like players when they hit kind of this 28, 29-year-old age where there maybe have been a fringe all-NBA player or maybe even made all-NBA a couple times like both Julius and Karl have. There's a lot of different fates for those type of players as they move on. I mean, this is a very like basic list and people you could disagree with how this all worked, but I was just kind of just pulled up the contracts and was kind of looking at some of them. Made a list of them, and I wrote these players down as hasn't worked that are like that after moving teams on a really big contract, having a fringe all NBA player. Bradley Beal, Zach Veen, and DeJounte Murray. Mitchell, maybe I think that's actually worked. I'm going the has. It's kind of the TBD. We're waiting. This guy Obi is in that in New York. Paul George, Pascal Siakam, those all could work. Maybe, but do both risk a big upside if they hit. And then I think was actually a little bit longer of guys than I expected, of guys that have quote unquote worked in that. I put down Domantas Sabonis, put down Rudy Gobert, Jalen Brunson, Drew Holiday, and Derek White, even kind of in how they. I mean, Derek White maybe isn't that level of salary and such. Anthony Davis, maybe he's higher than that, but I think it's fair to say that move, going from being an All NBA player, moving teams at that age, they did win a ring there, and I don't know, maybe some of those players are a little bit higher than Randle or Cat. Maybe some of them are a little bit lower, but there are really, those are kind of stark differences, right? There's like a big difference between what's happened between Zach LaVine in Chicago versus, what's happened with Jalen Brunson in New York, given kind of how that move, the salary they have and all of that. And it'll be, I think kind of to the point where we were talking about of the communicator of Finch and the understanding of role in the environment, I think probably plays a really big role in that working. And I think will play a really big role in it working or not working here with Randle in Minnesota. And same goes for Cat in New York too, right? Like I think there's paths for it to work. I think there's paths for it to be a little bit balky. But it will kind of come due to the care that is taken so as to maximize those players. And I've just been kind of thinking about that and how the Wolves are yet again in this position. They've already, they did it with Gobert, and I think they did that. I mean, that worked. They went to the Western Conference Finals. I'm just curious, I guess, to look back on this in 2-3 years and wonder which one of each of those bins Randle and Towns fit in.
Yeah, I think there are obviously context is so important. I mean,
right.
every guy you mentioned was talented enough for some GM to say, to basically just open the wallet really wide and say, this guy is a cornerstone for our team. Yeah. But then the next step is, all right, part of it obviously is the mindset and, the attitude of the player, but a lot of it is the contextual fit, both stylistically, personally, what's going on in that player's life, regardless. I mean, a messy divorce or, a bad injury or, or maybe a teammate's bad injury, a guy that he works with really well. So there's so many factors, but I would say right out of the chute that Cat has a much better chance because he has that deal. Sure. I mean, if you're going to pay somebody over $53 million and up to $61 million a year, you're going to make damn sure that they fit somehow. Yeah. I mean, when I was talking to Sam Mitchell, who was in town to do the NBA TV thing during Media Day, right. And I asked him what he thought of the Cat trade, and he said he thought it was a good deal for both teams. And I asked him, well, what about Cat and Tibbs? And Sam, man, when he's got a point, he's like a dog with a bone. So I mean, it's like, you don't think Tibbs? That man's getting $60 million a year, and you don't think Tibbs is going to be under pressure to use that guy, right? And he said, it won't be Cat that's leaving town if that relationship doesn't work. So, true. I mean, and that was, oftentimes Sam, trenchant as he is right about things like that. And so I do think that Randle, on the other hand, he's got Naz Reid on his shoulder, yes, they can both work, but not to the extent that, they are really vying to be the second best player on a really good team. And that is a kind of that's where DeJounte Murray fell off, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's where, like you could say Paul George, Kawhi, being like the sidekick, the great sidekick. I mean, think about what Chris Bosh, Wade and LeBron had to figure it out, but Chris Bosh really had to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And as for all the grief he got, kind of did it brilliantly in terms of turning himself into a corner three guy who actually came up big in a lot of interesting moments, if you think back on that time, but clearly said to himself, I'm the third wheel here, but I'm a really good third wheel. If you can get that type of thing going, for Cat, it's going to be, and I think Cat, given the way he regarded Ant, and given the fact that by all accounts, Jalen Brunson is a pretty good dude and a good teammate, I think that could work pretty well in New York. Now, the problem, of course, is Tibbs, and it's the New York media, and the fact that Cat, has a tendency to put his foot in his mouth in certain ways that, bring out all these, the Cat has a lot of haters. Let's not lie about it. And in New York City, a hate angle will get worked, And so I think situationally within the context of the team, of the Knicks, it's a good look for Cat because he's got the contract and he's got a really nice supporting cast, and it's in his backyard. It's the team he grew up, cheering for. So I think all those things are positive. On the negative side, you have to have a tough skin to play in New York City, and Cat has never proven to have a tough skin. So I still think it's going to be an interesting experience for him because Minnesota is all he's known, and Minnesota is a relatively tame market, and he was allowed a lot of leeway to grow here in a lot of different ways. But I do think still that long-term contract and the fact that he obviously was signed for a specific reason to do a specific thing, I'm not sure. And I mean, all you have to do is look at the trade.
Right.
The Knicks wanted Cat. The Wolves did not want Randle. They needed to sweeten the deal with DiVincenzo and other things before the Wolves would say, yes, we want Randle and DiVincenzo and that Detroit pick, So, and the length of the contracts. If Cat was a player option next year, that'd be a whole different ballgame.
That is a good difference to distinguish between those 15 or whatever players that I listed. I think almost all of them either were on a big contract when they went there or almost immediately signed a massive extension. And that's not why I have Randle in that group. I have Randle in that group because he has made All-NBA a couple times, and he is that caliber of player, if we measure it in that way. But he doesn't even make $30 million this year, which puts him in a very different financial tier than, again, everybody I listed there. And that part got me thinking about Aaron Gordon and the Denver move. That was more the situation that Gordon was traded for and into in Denver, where I think he had a year remaining. And then there was question marks about, is this going to be a long-term piece here? He did eventually sign an extension, but kind of on a similar cadence to what it will look like if Julius Randle signs an extension here. And another piece of it, of why the Aaron Gordon bit really worked, was he really changed his game, moving from Orlando to Denver. And in many ways, Aaron Gordon was a very, very much an on the ball type of guy with the Magic, and that changed brilliantly in Denver. I thought, that's a great trade that Tim Connolly made, and
absolutely, and
is a huge reason why that team went from where the Wolves are at now to where Denver went and won a championship. Right. It's harder for me to paint what that change is in Randle in a similar way to Gordon, just because there's maybe a little bit more of a pedigree there. But I don't know. I think at the time as well, there was plenty of questions around Gordon's fit and how that was going to work in Denver, and it did work. And it required adjustment from the player, but it also required convincing from the coaching staff and probably from the star player. It seems from everything I can gather that Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic are the best of friends. And I do wonder, how Anthony Edwards is going to be able to do that and similarly put his arm around Julius Randle as well. And I think that has to happen. But I do think there's something out there that's possible that is similar to the Aaron Gordon situation in Denver, which is, of course, again, relevant because Tim Connolly made that trade with the Nuggets.
Yeah, I think that if you're looking for not even necessarily a mid-tier star, but somebody who you say, all right, this could work, but the person will have to improve for this to work as much as you want it to, and then have that exactly happen. Nobody regarded Aaron Gordon as a lockdown defender in Orlando. They regarded him as a good defender, but they did not regard him as a guy who could guard 1 through 4, or not. I'm sorry, 2 through 5. And so his versatility, his ability to play off a number of different people at both ends of the court, the fact that he was a lob threat, the fact that he worked on his 3-point shot, all of those things, and the fact that, let's face it, you immediately become a better player when you're playing next to Nikola Jokic. And he was not so stupid that he couldn't immediately recognize that and tailor his game to what Jokic needed. And let's face it, he is an ideal complement for what Jokic needs on the court. He's a great.
Could we make that argument about Julius Randle with Ant?
Well, I don't know. That's the thing. I think that
That's what Finch has been saying for a long time. Of Ant needs another player who can be another, could create their own shot, break the paint themselves, so you don't run into the issues that they often ran into with late game offense, where they didn't have enough creators, enough scorers. I mean, I think people can disagree with that maybe being what the Wolves need, but it is what the coach has said the team has needed, that type of archetype of player. And I think Julius Randle is that.
Well, I will tell you this much. Media day, Mike Conley's words about Julius Randle surprised me. I did not. He talked about Randle being great in transition. He talked about Randle being a great secondary creator. I don't know how much of that was sincere, but I think if both of those things are accurate, and if Mike Conley was telling the truth, that dude knows basketball and knows what people can do on the. Put it this way, if Randle can be a really good transition player who also is a great secondary creator, meaning he gets a lot of hockey assists as well as assists, is a ball mover, is somebody who is willing to get out on, and run and just have fun playing basketball that way. The Julius Randle I know is somebody who posts up, bangs his man in the chest 3 or 4 times and hits a 6-footer. Or trying that, sees a man open, dishes to him, and the ball goes in. I don't see ball movement. I do not see pace. I do not see flow out of Julius Randle's game. It's not a Chris Finch flow offense. Now, I would love to be wrong and would happily admit I'm wrong if, in fact, it comes to pass, because that means the Wolves are going to be a lot better team, and Julius Randle is going to be a lot more valuable than I currently suspect.
I mean, I think the transition part is likely. I mean, that he is going to put more pace into the game, a difference, or I guess an advantage at the 4 that Randle has to Towns would be he has a greater ability to grab a defensive rebound and go. And that is going to inspire more transition or semi-transition opportunities. I think that was those semi-transition ones was the area the Wolves were just way, way, way too low in a season ago. I think Randle for sure gives you that. The secondary creator point is tougher, right? Because, yeah, Julius Randle is another creator, but being a secondary creator is not being a second creator, if that makes sense, right? It's doing it within the context of the first creator. And that's the open question here. Finch was excited about that too. And Julius's ability to, as he said, get to the middle of the floor and wheel his body to find, shooters around the perimeter. I think they do have a roster for that. They have some of those things, but yeah, that when we talk about the 15 games being wonky, first 15 games, that probably is what it looks like. The question to me is, when we do get to January or whatever, does that secondary creator part end up looking like something that makes does in fact make sense? Because the transition part to me feels like a given.
Right. What I would, again, I always want to put it in the context of Nas, because they are vying for a lot of the same minutes. Sure. Nas is better, I think, in transition. But to your point, you said grab the rebound and go down the court. Nas is not a great rebounder. And I do think that he's obviously best in an open flow system where, everybody's wheeling around, the old Iowa Ants thing, updated, 3 or 4 generations now. But it is always the thing that Ant and Nas have reveled in. You can just tell they just enjoy the hell out of playing with each other. And if Randle can be compensating for a lack of the foot speed and handle that enables Nas to be so great in transition, it will be by being able to grab that rebound and get to almost center court quickly. If he can do that, because Cat could get the rebounds as well as Randle, but could not wheel and run He did do really good, I think, especially the last 2 or 3 years of doing a really quick outlet.
Sure, he did.
And so,
and Cat rebounded really well.
Exactly. And so the other thing is, of course, is if Randle can grab the ball, spin, and be somebody who needs to be guarded instead of necessarily having it be an outlet and getting that outlet once people are all on the move,
right,
then that's a slight advantage too. And if those types of things can happen, then yeah. And if that's what Finch and Mike Conley, two of the smartest guys I know, see in Julius Randle, then fantastic.
Right. Let's grab another break here for the podcast version, but come back here and talk about Donte DiVincenzo a little bit here, Britt. How much sense does Donte DiVincenzo make on this for this team, and how much does he make the bench make sense?
It's the reason for the trade, in my opinion. The emergence of Nas and the availability of DiVincenzo, not necessarily in that order. I would say the availability of DiVincenzo and the emergence of Nas are the two biggest reasons why this trade happened. And DiVincenzo has been with the Bucks, the Warriors, and the Knicks, and has kind of had different roles with all of them, but also kind of similar things in which he is kind of not a glue guy so much as a piquant spice in the mix. I mean, somebody who goes out, somebody who provides energy, who provides toughness, and provides outside shooting. And those are three really cool things to have. Yeah. I asked him today at the presser about, playing the 1, the 2, or the 3, and he laughed that, under Tibbs, especially in the playoffs, I think for a while when Randle ironically was out, that he played some 4. He does have that versatility that Conley mentioned as one of the reasons he's excited about this deal. And as Jace pointed out on a tweet the other day, Jace Frederick, he's a really good cutter. And Finch is just dying for people to cut. It just drives him crazy that everybody stands around and waits for the ball. And if DiVincenzo can make that an example, because that was one of the things, once he began to really, he shot 7 threes a game for 2 seasons and made almost exactly 40% over the last 2 seasons.
Right.
When you can do that, you're going to get open on cuts because your spacing is so wide that you're going to catch people backdoor, peripheral vision, weak side, strong side.
You're going to be a deny guy if the team playing against DiVincenzo, and particularly given, a thing he's really added is a quicker trigger to his 3 too.
Yep.
Like you just need to kind of be up in deny, even off ball on DiVincenzo, trying to, prevent him from catching there, which leads to whether it be like a direct just backdoor or just make the defense chase you, cut through and replace yourself in that way and make the defense shift. He's, to your point with how well he shot over the last 2 seasons, it's only ramped up like linearly his 3-point volume over those 2 years. Like, that's going to be a perimeter player for this team, a type of perimeter player that they haven't had since Malik Beasley. Because while Nikhil shot really well last year, that was a little bit different. Not a quick trigger on that. Jaden has had high 30s seasons. Not exactly
Conley's
a quick
great
trigger.
at it, but Conley has to be the creator. He can't be, In fact, sometimes Finch, that experiment with J-Mac and Conley was specifically to get that kind of dynamic.
Movement shooter.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and he's 6'4", 203 pounds, not an ounce of fat on him from what it looks like. Just somebody who is a tough-nosed player. And it's a really great fit because contractually he's getting peanuts, $12 million a year on average for 3 years, perfect bridge between the theoretical Conley to Dillingham baton pass, doesn't have to have any pressure on it now. And who's to say DiVincenzo can't get himself a boost at the end of that 3 years and hang around as a catch and shoot 3 guy? The fact that he can play, I don't think in this particular, certainly not on this roster, are you looking for him to be a small forward, but he could be a combo guard very easily. And if he and Na are on the court at the same time, you do have a dynamic of either one of them being the initiator and the other one playing off the ball. And that's a really nice luxury to have in that second unit. So it's
particularly when you're thin at with point guards like that.
It's nothing but positive from what I see out of that. I mean, that was the first thing that caught my eye. I'm thinking, all right, Randle made the salaries fit, but DiVincenzo is the get here.
Well, I think that was the piece added late, and kind of push this thing over the top, because they do believe internally that he is going to do all those things that you were just talking about, and that it was something that this team needed. Depth is really important, I think, to both Finch and Conley. I think Conley even said that at the presser today. He goes, particularly in today's NBA, with more how the salaries have evolved and with the new CBA. Depth is harder to come by, but still just as valuable of a commodity. And this team was a super deep team last year, but by losing Anderson, Morris, and McLaughlin, they were going to not be a deep team. The same level.
A lot of ball creation. All three of those guys are great creators.
Yeah, probably the second, third, and fourth best on the team at that, wherever you want to put. I guess Ant maybe in there somewhere. Right. But yeah, so DiVincenzo gives that, while also being, it was a 2-for-1 trade, right? So like he just does bulk the bench if Randle fills into the cap role there. And I think in many ways he will be treated similar to Kyle Anderson by Finch, and somebody he always has a trust in, to go to, and it will take a lot for Finch to ever, go away from that, or to shrink, to shrink that role. And we know, or we've heard Finch say how important that role was to him. I think in many ways DiVincenzo fills that.
I don't know if I go that far, but I would say that
far, like that's too high of a bar as to.
Well, I mean, no, the Kyle Anderson, the Kyle Anderson, because Finch. Let's face it. I mean,
dude, I think Finch is going to love DiVincenzo.
I think he's going to love DiVincenzo, but he's not going to be a break glass guy. He's not going to be a guy that you put in automatically. All right, we need this guy in the lineup right now.
Well, yeah, I guess he can't play the 4 or 5. So, and that's what Kyle. Anytime there was anything balky going on about, however, the Wolves front court was messing up. Yeah, that was all right. Kyle,
I mean, I think that the only difference I see, and I'm not trying to devalue DiVincenzo. I'm just saying that Finch did look at him as a point guard, and I don't think that DiVincenzo's point guard skills are as good as Slow-Mo's. And so, but that doesn't mean, his shooting obviously is much better.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what I was going to say is Tim Connolly, I did this feature on him that'll be out who knows when at this point, but essentially had a chance to talk with him at length. And one of the things that's really, really important to him is pedigree players being able to teach guys like Ant and Jaden McDaniels and Naz Reid how to win at an impressionable age. And I really think he thinks that DiVincenzo's ring with the Bucks, his deep playoff experience in both Golden State and last year with the Knicks, are things that really are important in terms of contributing to the culture.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't want people who have been good players on bad teams for a long time. In fact, he says that learning how to lose at an impressionable age is really, really hard to get out of players.
Sure.
It becomes something where it is that you pick up the habits, you pick up the attitude, you pick up just the whole mean of it. And so he's a big believer in winning culture guys. And the fact that DiVincenzo is a winning culture guy, I think is very important to him, if not Finch.
Last thing I, want to get from you, I've spent a lot of time over this week, talking about Cat's tenure and covering him and the different iterations of the teams has been on, and kind of Cat's been on the team the entire time I've been doing this for a job. But I wasn't here the entirety of the Cat tenure. This is your 35th year on the Wolves beat, so you definitely have the full Cat tenure covered. And I guess just saw it from start to finish here. And obviously we've talked about Cat endlessly on the podcast and in person over time, of the bloom of his rose and the thorns associated. How is your thought process surrounding just the Cat piece and his tenure? How did that strike you initially, and how are you, I guess, thinking about it now?
The amazing thing about Cat to me was how much agency he put in random dudes like me and you. And, I got the impression that what I said to Cat in my interactions with Cat, I could hurt Cat's feelings. I never felt that way about almost any athlete I've covered. That, if I wrote something bad about him, or if I had a negative opinion of him, or he began to realize that I thought less of what he was accomplishing than most people thought, that had an impression upon him. And sometimes when I was most negative to him, he was nicer to me as a result of that. That dynamic of need to win me over or something was a unique relationship I've had with a professional athlete. And it frankly made me uncomfortable and cool at the same time. I mean, who doesn't want, an athlete they covered who thinks so much of them that, what I think of them matters to them. On the other hand, it's not good for my ability to just write about somebody. I even somebody, who I'm obviously a huge fanboy of, like Finch or something. I've got to, make sure, like Chris Finch said the other day, that this deal wasn't made with money in mind. That's bullshit. I need to be able to say that no matter how much I like Chris Finch. Obviously, money is a huge factor in this. So the point being is that Cat, I think, has made strides. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's got some notches now, finally. I mean, he's got some playoff wins that were directly attributable to some of the things he did on the court. And they weren't the things that he is most known for. It is like, oh, yeah, well, Cat got 40, but everybody else had to help him out on defense. It was almost the opposite of that. Yeah. And Cat wasn't the best defender in the Phoenix series, but he was the right defender, the right man at the right time to guard the right player. And as a result, they swept. Or the Jokic methodology of guarding Jokic, we talked about it ad nauseum, essentially is Cat was crucial to that matchup. These are things you can't, no amount of praise from the outside is going to fulfill you like something you do on the court turning out to be vital in winning time. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Cat was able to get that last season, I wrote about this. I'm really glad he left the organization on that high note because there was a hole, and there are a chunk of people, a sizable minority of people who are quote unquote Cat haters, who just thought he was soft, who thought he was corny. And I understand where they're coming from, but I also think, like so many of these things, he's a nuanced player and person. And there's a lot of really fascinating, cool stuff about him. Cat doesn't have a mean bone in his body. I mean, if the meanest I ever saw Cat was when he wanted to get on the Pat Bev bandwagon and slag some of the same people Pat Bev was slagging. But I mean, that's about as mean as I ever saw a cat. He's just not a cruel guy. And I think he's instinctively somebody who wants to help the underdog in some way, shape, or form. And that's, I mean, people are making hundreds of millions of dollars, that's
a good way to put it. He's nothing like anybody I've ever met who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
He just is approachable, always approachable. I mean, did you ever feel like Cat was going to bite your head off if you came up to him, regardless of the circumstances?
No. Yeah.
Did it ever even enter your mind? I mean, I can't think of a player on the Wolves, maybe Mike Conley, but you knew in the back of your mind that Mike Conley is just kind of suffering you,
Right.
And so I just feel like and I think that's one of the reasons that there's also, in this case, a majority of the Wolves fan base that are Cat lovers, is that approachability and that warmth and receptivity to the fan base came through for a lot of people. And whether even if you didn't absolutely love his game, you knew there was enough in his game to love, and you knew that the person as a human was lovable, and so you embraced it. So and I think that's cool. And what I hope is that a really rough town like New York has enough people like that to sustain him moving on.
Yeah, I hope that for him too. I mean, I like how you literally closed your column, quote, "I wish him ongoing redemption, satisfaction, and peace of mind." And yeah, being as you've had a relationship with him for 10 years, and it is a relationship. It's not like I always try and say it's not like it's not a friendship, but it is it's a professional relationship. It's like somebody that you that you work in the same office as, there's a familiarity of seeing their face every day, and a necessarily relationship that comes with that. And you get to know the person as a person to some extent. And I think, for both of us, we just experienced that and had so many other experiences with other professional athletes that weren't necessarily negative. It was just wholly unique. And that's why I think it's interesting from your perspective of somebody who's, covered the NBA for decades and different sports as well, to have felt that this was a wholly unique coverage experience for you as somebody who's not as that far into my career. That's a totally, it's been a totally foreign thing to me as well. And I'm just, I'm grateful for having had that opportunity to cover him. And I'm sure there will be nothing quite like that again. Britt, this has been fun. I'm sure we will continue talking about this trade ad nauseum, like you said, for the rest of the season. But this is a good flag to plant right now, and we'll keep talking about this as it goes. First game is tomorrow night, Friday night. Another one in Des Moines on the 11th, and we'll be tracking where this Wolves team goes, and also keeping our eye on where Karl goes in New York as well. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for the conversation. Coming up next on the show is Kyle and I normally record on Fridays. We're going to actually record on Saturday morning this week, just so we can talk about the first preseason game. We're not sure exactly what that's going to look like, but Kyle and I will do a quick pod giving some takeaways that we have from that game, and that should probably be in your feed sometime midday on Saturday afternoon. So until then, he's Britt, I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever